This is a recording of the John Dryden translation of Virgil's Aeneid. This translation is a poetic translation from 1697, which makes the language difficult for a modern reader. As such, this recording will include several intermittent explanatory notes. If you are looking for a version without these notes, a good option is the LibriVox recorded version on the YouTube channel called Audiobooks. Book 1 of the Aeneid recounts the story of the Trojan fleet, led by the hero of the story, Aeneas, first being battered by a storm sent by Juno, or Hera, and second, arriving at the developing African city of Carthage. Book 1 will start with a preface called the Proem before getting into the rest of the story. The Aeneid, by Virgil, translated by John Dryden. Book 1. Arms and the man I sing, who, forced by fate and haughty Juno's unrelenting hate, expelled and exiled, left the Trojan shore. Long labors both by sea and land he bore, and in the doubtful war before he won the Latian realm and built the destined town, his banished gods restored to rights divine and settled sure succession in his line, from whence the race of Alban fathers come, and the long glories of majestic Rome. O Muse, the causes and the crimes relate, what goddess was provoked and whence her hate, for what offense the Queen of Heaven began to persecute so brave, so just a man, involved his anxious life in endless cares, exposed to wants, and hurried into wars. Can heavenly minds such high resentment show, or exercise their spite in human woe? So Virgil is starting the poem with an introduction of sorts. This is a story about, line 1, arms, or war, and the man, our hero Aeneas, who is forced to leave Troy by both fate and by Juno's hatred. And he will go to Italy, the Latian realm, line 6, to become the father of those who will found the great city of Alba Longa, from which come the Alban fathers, line 9, including Romulus and Remus, who will found majestic Rome, line 10. So Aeneas is painted as the first father of Rome, and this is the story of how he came to Italy to fulfill his destiny and create the Roman Empire. And the proem ends asking why Juno hates Aeneas so much. So we continue, line 19. Against the Tiber's mouth, but far away, an ancient town was seated on the sea, a Tyrian colony, the people made stout for the war and studious of their trade. Carthage the name, beloved by Juno more than her own Argos, or the Samian shore. Here stood her chariot, here if heaven were kind, the seat of awful empire she designed. Yet she had heard an ancient rumor fly, long cited by the people of the sky, that times to come should see the Trojan race her Carthage ruin, and her towers deface. Nor thus confined, the yoke of sovereign sway should on the necks of all the nations lay. She pondered this, and feared it was in fate, nor could forget the war she waged of late for conquering Greece against the Trojan state. Besides, long causes working in her mind, and secret seeds of envy lay behind. Deep graven in her heart the doom remained of partial Paris, and her form disdained the grace bestowed on ravished Ganymede, Electra's glory in her injured bed. So, why does Juno hate Aeneas and the Trojans? Well, it seems like 3 reasons. Number 1, she loves Carthage, and she's heard that it's the fate of the Trojans to destroy Carthage. Number 2, she just sided with the Greeks against the Trojans in the Trojan War, so that's in the Iliad, and especially she hates Paris. Paris, the one, when asked which goddess was the fairest, said not Juno, but Venus, so she hates Paris for this reason. There's also 2 other characters, Ganymede and Electra, mentioned, and Ganymede would be Jove's cupbearer, a Trojan, who Jove just consistently gives attention and affection for, and so Juno is jealous of that. Electra would be a daughter of the Titan Atlas, and she is the patron of Troy and Jove also has love for Electra, and so Juno is jealous of Electra as well. So for all these reasons, Juno hates and seeks to destroy Aeneas and the Trojans. Line 42. Each was a cause alone, and all combined to kindle vengeance in her haughty mind. For this, far distant from the Latian coast, she drove the remnants of the Trojan host. And 7 long years the unhappy wandering train were tossed by storms and scattered through the main. Such time, such toil required the Roman name, such length of labor for so vast a frame. Now scarce the Trojan fleet with sails and oars had left behind the fair Sicilian shores, entering with cheerful shouts the watery rain and ploughing frothy furrows in the main, when laboring still with endless discontent, the Queen of Heaven did thus her fury vent. Then am I vanquished? Must I yield, said she, and must the Trojans reign in Italy? So fate will have it, and Jove adds his force, nor can my power divert their happy course. Could angry Pallas, with revengeful spleen, the Grecian navy burn and drown the men? She, for the fault of one offending foe, the bolts of Jove himself presumed to throw. With whirlwinds from beneath she tossed the ship, and bare exposed the bosom of the deep. Then, as an eagle gripes the trembling game, the wretch, yet hissing with her father's flame, she strongly seized, and with a burning wound transfixed and naked on a rock she bound. But I, who walk in awful state above the majesty of heaven, the sister wife of Jove, for length of years my fruitless force employ against the thin remains of ruined Troy. What nations now to Juno power will pray, or offerings on my slighted altars lay? Thus raged the goddess, and with fury fraught the restless regions of the storm she sought, where in a spacious cave of living stone the tyrant Aeolus from his airy throne with power imperial curbs the struggling winds, and sounding tempests in dark prisons binds. So here we have Juno seeking to destroy the Trojans, and she is immediately frustrated because she knows that fate and Jove will not let it happen, if you look in line 58. But then she's upset because Pallas, which is another name for Athena in line 60, when she was upset with the lesser Ajax actually profaned her temple. This is not in the Iliad, but it's afterward. The lesser Ajax profaned her temple, and the Achaeans didn't kill him before they left. And so she was upset, and she pled with Jove, with Jupiter or Zeus, and he allowed her to destroy the Greek navy and then put the lesser Ajax on this rock just because she was upset with him. And so if she got her way, then why isn't it right that Juno would get hers? And so she is in a frenzy, and she goes in line 79 to the tyrant Aeolus, who is the god of the winds, and she tries to convince him to start this kind of storm. Line 82. This way and that the impatient captives tend, and pressing for release the mountains rend. High in his hall the undaunted monarch stands, and shakes his scepter, and their rage commands. Which did he not, their unresisted sway would sweep the world before them in their way. Earth, air, and seas through empty space would roll, and heaven would fly before the driving soul. In fear of this, the father of the gods confined their fury to those dark abodes, and locked him safe within, oppressed with mountain loads. Imposed the king with arbitrary sway to loose their fetters, or their force allay, to whom the suppliant queen her prayers addressed, and thus the tenor of her suit expressed. O Aeolus, for to thee the king of heaven the power of tempests and of winds has given. Thy force alone their fury can restrain, and smooth the waves, or swell the troubled main. A race of wandering slaves, abhorred by me, with prosperous passage cut the Tuscan sea. To fruitful Italy their course they steer, and for their vanquished god design new temples there. Raise all thy winds, with night involve the skies. Sink or disperse my fatal enemies. Twice 7 the charming daughters of the main around my person wait, and bear my train. Succeed my wish, and second my design. The fairest Deopeia shall be thine, and make thee father of a happy line. To this the god, it is yours, O queen, to will the work which duty binds me to fulfill. These airy kingdoms and this wide command are all the presents of your bounteous hand. Yours is my sovereign's grace, and as your guest I sit with gods at their celestial feast. Raise tempest at your pleasure, or subdue, dispose of empire which I hold from you. He said, and hurled against the mountain side his quivering spear, and all the god applied. The raging winds rush through the hollow wound, and dance aloft in air, and skim along the ground. Then settling on the sea, the surges sweep, raise liquid mountains, and disclose the deep. South, east, and west, with mixed confusion roar, and roll the foaming billows to the shore. The cables crack, the sailors' fearful cries ascend, and sable night involves the skies, and heaven itself is ravished from their eyes. Loud peals of thunder from the poles ensue, then flashing fires the transient light renew. The face of things a frightful image bears, and present death in various forms appears. Struck with unusual fright, the Trojan chief, with lifted hands and eyes, invokes relief. So here we have Juno going to Aeolus, the god of the winds, and he lives in his cave, and all of the winds and these forces are kind of caged up in there, and he's given this job by Zeus, or Jove in this, to keep the winds caged so they don't destroy everything. And so Juno comes to Aeolus, and she says, I want you to destroy my enemies who are at sea. They're headed to Italy, and I hate them, and will you do me this favor? And by the way, if you do, you can have the most beautiful of my 14 nymphs as your wife. And so Aeolus agrees, doesn't really mention the wife part, but says, sure, I will do this for you. And so it just gets chaotic and terrifying at sea. Everything's sable or black, just pitch black, and everything's thundering and lightning, and it's a horrific storm. And so we ended off with the Trojan chief, Aeneas, lifting his eyes and invoking relief. Line 137. And thrice and 4 times happy those, he cried, that under Ilian walls before their parents died. Tydides, bravest of the Grecian train, why would not I by that strong arm be slain, and lie by noble Hector on the plain, or great Sarpedon in those bloody fields where Simois rolls the bodies and the shields of heroes whose dismembered hands yet bear the dart aloft and clench the pointed spear. Thus while the pious prince his fate bewails, fierce Boreas drove against his flying sails, and rent the sheets, the raging billows rise, and mount the tossing vessels to the skies. Nor can the shivering oars sustain the blow. The galley gives her side and turns her prow, while those astern descending down the steep through gaping waves behold the boiling deep. 3 ships were hurried by the southern blast, and on the secret shelves with fury cast. Those hidden rocks the Ausonian sailors knew. They called them altars when they rose in view, and showed their spacious backs above the flood. 3 more, fierce Eurus in his angry mood dashed on the shallows of the moving sand, and in mid-ocean left them moored aland. Orontes' bark that bore the Lycian crew, a horrid sight even in the hero's view, from stem to stern by waves was overborne. The trembling pilot from his rudder torn was headlong hurled, thrice round the ship was tossed, then bulged at once, and in the deep was lost. And here and there above the waves were seen arms, pictures, precious goods, and floating men. The stoutest vessel to the storm gave way, and sucked through loosened planks the rushing sea. Ilioneus was her chief, Elathes old, Acades faithful, Abas young and bold, endured not less their ships with gaping seams amid the deluge of the briny streams. So here we have just this horrific storm so horrific that we hear of our hero Aeneas, and it's the first time we hear him talk. And he says, "Thrice and 4 times happy those that under Ilion walls before their parents died." I wish I had died in the Trojan War and my parents had seen it, and that would be better than this awful mess. And he thinks about all these people who die. He thinks about people whose hands were literally cut off, and he envies their dead bodies because of how horrific this storm is. So really kind of grisly, horrific, violent storm. We have people being thrown overboard. We have this recounting that all around there's arms, so there's weapons, there's pictures, precious goods, and floating men. So it's just chaos and bodies and rubble and all of this stuff in the ocean. 176. Meantime, Imperial Neptune heard the sound of raging billows breaking on the ground. Displeased and fearing for his watery reign, he reared his awful head above the main, serene in majesty, then rolled his eyes around the space of earth and seas and skies. He saw the Trojan fleet dispersed, distressed by stormy winds and wintry heaven oppressed. Full well the god his sister's envy knew, and what her aims and what her arts pursue. He summoned Eurus in the western blast, and first an angry glance on both he cast, then thus rebuked: "Audacious winds, from whence this bold attempt, this rebel insolence? Is it for you to ravage seas and land, unauthorized by my supreme command, to raise such mountains on the troubled main, whom I... But first it is fit the billows to restrain, and then you shall be taught obedience to my reign. Hence, to your lord my royal mandate bear, the realms of ocean and the fields of air are mine, not his. By fatal lot to me the liquid empire fell, and trident of the sea. His power to hollow caverns is confined. There let him reign, the jailer of the wind, with hoarse commands his breathing subjects call, and boast and bluster in his empty hall." He spoke, and while he spoke he smoothed the sea, dispelled the darkness, and restored the day. Camathoi, Triton, and the sea-green train of beauteous nymphs, the daughters of the main, clear from the rocks the vessels with their hands. The god himself with ready trident stands, and opes the deep, and spreads the moving sands. Then heaves them off the shoals, where he guides his finny coursers, and in triumph rides. The waves unruffle, and the sea subsides. As when in tumults rise the ignoble crowd, mad are their motions, and their tongues are loud, and stones and brands and rattling volleys fly, and all the rustic arms that fury can supply. If then some grave and pious man appear, they hush their noise, and lend a listening ear. He soothes with sober words their angry mood, and quenches their innate desire of blood. So when the father of the flood appears, and o'er the seas his sovereign trident rears, their fury falls. He skims the liquid plains, high on his chariot, and with loosened reins, majestic moves along, and awful peace maintains. The weary Trojans ply their shattered oars to nearest land, and make the Libyan shores. Within a long recess there lies a bay. An island shades it from the rolling sea, and forms a port secure for ships to ride. Broke by the jutting land on either side, in double streams the briny waters glide. Betwixt 2 rows of rocks a sylvan scene appears above, and groves for ever green. A grot is formed beneath with mossy seats, to rest the Nereids and exclude the heats. Down through the crannies of the living walls the crystal streams descend in murmuring falls. No hawsers need to bind the vessels here, nor bearded anchors, for no storms they fear. 7 ships within this happy harbor meet, the thin remainders of the scattered fleet. The Trojans, worn with toils and spent with woes, leap on the welcome land and seek their wished repose. So here we have Neptune, which would be Poseidon, hearing about the storm and seeing the chaos of it, and so he goes and he really chews out the gods of the wind, Eurus and these other winds, and he says stop, and he rides on the surface of the sea with his sea horses, and everything is calm, and this extended simile, just like when a crowd is arguing with each other and they're hungry and thirsty for blood, if someone skilled and peaceful rises up, he can calm them, and that's exactly the effect that Neptune has. And so the sea is finally calm, and the Trojans are rowing wearily to shore, and they're going to end up on the Libyan shore, and there's this cave and a stream, and it's this very peaceful place. And so 7 of the ships of the Trojans end up there, starting from 20, so quite a bit of loss here. Line 245. First, good Achates, with repeated strokes of clashing flints their hidden fire provokes. Short flame succeeds, a bed of withered leaves, the dying sparkles in their fall receives. Caught into life, in fiery fumes they rise, and fed with stronger food, invade the skies. The Trojans, dropping wet, or stand around the cheerful blaze, or lie along the ground. Some dry their corn, infected with the brine, then grind with marbles and prepare to dine. Aeneas climbs the mountain's airy brow, and takes a prospect of the seas below. If Capys thence or Antheus he could spy, or see the streamers of Caicus fly. No vessels were in view. But on the plain 3 beamy stags command a lordly train of branching heads. The more ignoble throng attend their stately steps, and slowly graze along. He stood, and well secure they fed below, he took the quiver and the trusty bow Achates used to bear. The leaders first he laid along, and then the vulgar pierced, nor ceased his arrows till the shady plain 7 mighty bodies with their blood to stain. For the 7 ships he made an equal share, and to the port returned triumphant from the war. The jars of generous wine, Acestes' gift, when his Trinacrian shores the navy left, he set abroach, and for the feast prepared, in equal portions with the venison shared. Thus, while he dealt it round, the pious chief with cheerful words allayed the common grief. Endure and conquer! Jove will soon dispose to future good our past and present woes. With me the rocks of Scylla you have tried, the inhuman Cyclops in his den defied. What greater ills hereafter can you bear? Resume your courage and dismiss your care. An hour will come with pleasure to relate your sorrows past as benefits of fate. Through various hazards and events we move to Latium, and the realms foredoomed by Jove. Called to the seat the promise of the skies, where Trojan kingdoms once again may rise. Endure the hardships of your present state. Live, and reserve yourselves for better fate. These words he spoke, but spoke not from his heart. His outward smiles concealed his inward smart. The jolly crew, unmindful of the past, the quarry share their plenteous dinner haste. Some strip the skin, some portion out the spoil, the limbs yet trembling in the cauldrons boil, some on the fire their reeking entrails broil. So we have all of the Trojans are kind of chilling out. They start a fire, they're trying to dry their clothes, they're laying around, and up Aeneas goes on a cliff to try to see if he sees any of the lost ships, and he sees none. No ships, but what he does see is 7 stags. And so he shoots all the deer and brings them back, 1 for each ship, and everyone is warming up and everything, and he brings back the food, and he gives this rousing speech. We can do it, men, endure, we will conquer, we're fated for great things. But then we're told in 291 and 92, these words he spoke, but spoke not from his heart. His outward smiles concealed his inward smart, and so he's really just putting on a good face for his men because he's really despairing on the inside, even though on the outside he's telling the men to cheer up. So everyone's eating, and then we move on to 98. Stretched on the grassy turf, at ease they dine, restore their strength with meat, and cheer their souls with wine. Their hunger thus appeased, their care attends the doubtful fortune of their absent friends. Alternate hopes and fears their minds possess, whether to deem 'em dead or in distress. Above the rest Aeneas mourns the fate of brave Orontes, and the uncertain state of Gaius, Lycus, and of Amycus. The day, but not their sorrows, ended thus, when from aloft Almighty Jove surveys earth, air, and shores, and navigable seas. At length on Libyan realms he fixed his eyes, whom pondering thus on human miseries, when Venus saw, she, with a lowly look, not free from tears, her heavenly sire bespoke. O King of gods and men, whose awful hand disperses thunder on the seas and land, disposing all with absolute command, how could my pious son thy power incense? Or what, alas, is vanished Troy's offence? Our hope of Italy not only lost on various seas by various tempests tossed, but shut from every shore and barred from every coast. You promised once a progeny divine of Romans rising from the Trojan line, and after time should hold the world in awe, and to the land and ocean give the law. How is your doom reversed, which eased my care when Troy was ruined in that cruel war? Then fates to fates I could oppose, but now, when fortune still pursues her former blow, what can I hope? What worse can still succeed? What end of labors has your will decreed? Antenor from the midst of Grecian hosts could pass secure and pierce the Illyrian coasts, where rolling down the steep Timavus raves, and through 9 channels disembogues his waves. At length he founded Padua's happy seat, and gave his Trojans a secure retreat. There fixed their arms, and there renewed their name, and there in quiet rules and crowned with fame. But we, descended from your sacred line, entitled to your heaven and rights divine, are banished earth, and for the wrath of one removed from Latium and the promised throne. Are these our scepters, these our due rewards? And is it thus that Jove his plighted faith regards? To whom the father of the immortal race, smiling with that serene indulgent face, with which he drives the clouds and clears the skies, first gave a holy kiss, then thus replies. Daughter, dismiss thy fears. To thy desire the fates of thine are fixed and stand entire. Thou shalt behold thy wished Lavinian walls, and ripe for heaven when fate Aeneas calls. Then shalt thou bear him up sublime to me. No counsels have reversed my firmer decree, unless new fears disturb thy happy state. No, I have searched the mystic rolls of fate. Thy son, nor is the appointed season far, in Italy shall wage successful war, shall tame fierce nations in the bloody field, and sovereign laws impose, and cities build, till after every foe subdued, the sun thrice through the signs his annual race shall run. This is his time prefixed. Ascanius then, now called Iulus, shall begin his reign. He 30 rolling years the crown shall wear. Then from Lavinian shall the seat transfer, and with hard labor Alba Longa build. The throne with his succession shall be filled. 300 circuits more, then shall be seen Aelia the fair, a priestess and a queen, who full of Mars and time with kindly throes, shall at a birth 2 goodly boys disclose. The royal babes a tawny wolf shall drain, then Romulus his grandsire's throne shall gain. Of martial towers the founder shall become, the people Romans call the city Rome. To them no bounds of empire I assign, nor term of years to their immortal line. Even haughty Juno, who with endless broils the earth, seas, and heaven, and Jove himself turmoils, at length atoned, her friendly power shall join to cherish and advance the Trojan line. The subject world shall Rome's dominion own, and prostrate shall adore the nation of the gown. An age is ripening in revolving fate, when Troy shall overturn the Grecian state, and sweet revenge her conquering son shall call, to crush the people that conspired her fall. Then Caesar from the Julian stock shall rise, whose empire ocean, and whose fame the skies alone shall bound, whom fraught with eastern spoils our heaven, the just reward of human toils, securely shall repay with rites divine, and incense shall ascend before his sacred shrine. Then dire debate and impious war shall cease, and the stern age be softened into peace. Then banished faith shall once again return, and vestal fires and hallowed temples burn, and Remus with Quirinus shall sustain the righteous laws, and fraud and force restrain. Janus himself before his fane shall wait, and keep the dreadful issues of his gate, with bolts and iron bars. Within remains imprisoned fury, bound in brazen chains. High on a trophy raised of useless arms he sits, and threats the world with vain alarms. So, we have this epic section for Romans. The Trojans are recuperating a little bit, but thinking about what happened to all their friends that drowned at sea, or they're living, they don't know. And looking down on this kind of somber scene is Aphrodite, Venus. And so she goes and she talks to Jove, and she said, Dad, Zeus, you told me that the Trojans would found this amazing kingdom, this place that would, 325, give the law to all of the land and all of the ocean. They would master the world. And so I wasn't so upset when Troy fell at the end of the Trojan War, but now, what's going to happen? Did you change your mind? What am I supposed to do? Other people have survived except for my crew, and other people are doing well, and look at my crew. Aeneas and his men are not doing well. Why? And she wants an explanation, and so Jove launches on this explanation of everything that's going to come from Rome. That Aeneas is going to go and be successful very soon in his wars in Italy, and Ascanius is going to rise, and he's going to build Alba Longa, which is kind of the parent city of Rome. And that 300 circuits of the sun later, so 300 years later, Aelia, the princess, will have Romulus and Remus, and their father is Mars, and it's the whole story of the founding of Rome. And to this empire I assign no bounds, nor term of years to their immortal line. So this is an empire that will never end, and that will have no bounds. It will take over the world for eternity, is kind of this idea. And so it'll be so great that even Juno in line 380, even haughty Juno will eventually join their force and cherish and advance the Trojan line, which means Juno will at one point not be against them anymore, but will be on Team Rome. And then one will arise, starting in 390, Caesar from the Julian stock. So this is talking about Caesar Augustus. And he will rise and rule, and he will have this age of peace. And everything will be realized, and there's this kind of poetic image at the end. Janus, who is the god of gates and kind of transitional periods, so like life and death and war and peace, he's kind of the god of that kind of idea of transition. And he's going to finally lock his gates, and what's going to be inside is fury. And all of his fury and chaos and rage will be locked inside, kept by Janus, because there won't be a need to go back and forth in this transition anymore to war and peace, but it'll just be peace forever. So this is what Jove is predicting to Venus. Hey, take hope that this is coming. Continuing on line 408. He said, and sent Cylenius with command, that's Mercury, or Hermes, to free the ports and ope the Punic land to Trojan guests, lest, ignorant of fate, the queen might force them from her town and state. Down from the steep of heaven Cylenius flies, and cleaves with all his wings the yielding skies. Soon on the Libyan shore descends the god, performs his message, and displays his rod. The surly murmurs of the people cease, and as the fates required, they give the peace. The queen herself suspends the rigid laws, the Trojans pities, and protects their cause. Meantime, in shades of night Aeneas lies, care seized his soul, and sleep forsook his eyes. But when the sun restored the cheerful day, he rose, the coast and country to survey. Anxious and eager to discover more, it looked a wild, uncultivated shore. But whether humankind or beasts alone possessed the new-found region was unknown. Beneath a ledge of rocks his fleet he hides, tall trees surround the mountain's shady sides, the bending brow above a safe retreat provides. Armed with 2 pointed darts he leaves his friends, and true Aeneid on his steps attends. Lo, in the deep recesses of the wood, before his eyes his goddess mother stood, a huntress in her habit and her mien, so her clothes and appearance, she looks like a huntress, her dress a maid, her air confessed a queen. Bare were her knees, and knots her garments bind, loose was her hair, and wantoned in the wind. Her hand sustained a bow, her quiver hung behind. She seemed a virgin of the Spartan blood. With such array Harpalyce bestrode her Thracian courser, and outstripped the rapid flood. So she looks like this Harpalyce, which is a famous Greek huntress. "Ho, strangers, have you lately seen," she said, "one of my sisters like myself arrayed, who crossed the lawn or in the forest strayed? A painted quiver at her back she bore, varied with spots a lynx's hide she wore, and at full cry pursued the tusky boar." Thus Venus, thus her son replied again: "None of your sisters have we heard or seen, O virgin, or what other name you bear. Above that style, O more than mortal fair, your voice and mien celestial birth betray. If as you seem the sister of the day, or one at least of chaste Diana's train, let not an humble suppliant sue in vain. But tell us, stranger, long and tempest-tossed, what earth we tread, and who commands the coast? Then on your name shall wretched mortals call, and offered victims at your altars fall." "I dare not," she replied, "assume the name of goddess, or celestial honors claim, for Tyrian virgins bows and quivers bear, and purple buskins o'er their ankles wear. No gentle youth, in Libyan lands you are, a people rude in peace and rough in war. The rising city, which from far you see, is Carthage, and a Tyrian colony. Phoenician Dido rules the growing state, who fled from Tyre to shun her brother's hate. Great were her wrongs, her story full of fate, which I will sum in short. Sichaeus, known for wealth and brother to the Punic throne, possessed fair Dido's bed, and either heart at once was wounded with an equal dart. Her father gave her, yet a spotless maid, Pygmalion then the Tyrian sceptre swayed, one who condemned divine and human laws. Then strife ensued, and cursed gold the cause. The monarch, blinded with desire of wealth, with steel invades his brother's life by stealth. Before the sacred altar made him bleed, and long from her concealed the cruel deed. Some tale, some new pretense he daily coined, to soothe his sister and delude her mind. At length, in dead of night, the ghost appears of her unhappy lord. The spectre stares, and with erected eyes his bloody bosom bares. The cruel altars and his fate he tells, and the dire secret of his house reveals. Then warns the widow, with her household gods, to seek a refuge in remote abodes. Last, to support her in so long a way, he shows her where his hidden treasure lay. Admonished thus, and seized with mortal fright, the queen provides companions of her flight. They meet, and all combine to leave the state, who hate the tyrant, or who fear his hate. They seize a fleet, which ready rigged they find, nor is Pygmalion's treasure left behind. The vessels, heavy laden, put to sea. With prosperous winds a woman leads the way. I know not if by stress of weather driven, or was their fatal course disposed by heaven. At last they landed, where from far your eyes may view the turrets of New Carthage rise. There broad a space of ground, which Bursa called, from the bull's hide they first enclosed and walled. But whence are you? What country claims your birth? What seek you, strangers, on our Libyan earth?